whispered. The Montana wind moved through the tall pines like a restless spirit. Snow drifted across the ridge in slow white waves, swallowing the land in a quiet that felt too big for any living soul. Halfway up that mountain sat a small log cabin, its windows fogged and shaking from the cold. Inside sat Eli Turner, a man whose shoulders had once been strong with hope, but now hung heavy with grief. His elbows rested on his knees as he stared at a small cradle carved from rough pine. Inside it, his newborn son Samuel whimpered, the sound weak and thin as if the baby no longer had strength to cry. Eli's eyes were red and tired, the blue in them washed out like a sky after a storm. The fire in the hearth burned low, barely giving warmth. Eli reached for the bottle sitting on the small table beside him. The milk was cold and starting to sour, but he tried anyway. "Come on, little one," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please try. For your mama." Quote. Samuel turned away, his tiny face scrunching with hunger and exhaustion. Eli sat back, running his hand over his tired face. His beard had grown uneven and wild, and his clothes hung loose on him. He hadn't slept more than a handful of hours since Mary, his wife, passed. She had given birth 2 weeks earlier, and the bleeding never stopped. By sunrise, she was gone. Her shawl still hung by the window. Sometimes wind slipped through a crack in the frame and lifted its corner like a hand searching for her. Her scent, lavender mixed with wood smoke, still floated soft and painful in the room. Eli swallowed against the ache in his chest. "Lord," he muttered, staring at the cradle, "I've buried the best part of me. Don't take the rest." The baby's cries grew softer until they faded into little breathless whimpers. Eli felt panic crawl up his spine. He lifted Samuel gently and held him close, pacing the creaking floorboards. His boots tapped a slow rhythm, and every step echoed like a prayer. Outside, the storm grew heavier. Snow pressed against the shutters. Wind howled like wolves in the trees. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time had stopped making sense. Dusk turned the world dim. The fire softened. Eli's hope thinned. Then came a knock. Sharp, clear, impossible. Eli froze. No one traveled this far into the mountains in winter. Not unless they were desperate or dangerous. He set Samuel back in the cradle and grabbed his rifle from the wall. The knocking came again. 3 solid raps that cut through wind and fear. Eli took a slow breath. "Who's there?" he called. For a moment, nothing. Only the storm's cry. Then a woman's voice answered, shaky and weak. "Please, I need help." Eli's grip tightened on the rifle. "State your business." "There was an accident," the voice said. "The stagecoach overturned near the creek. I can't walk any farther." Her voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. There's a baby." That changed everything. Eli threw open the door. Wind slammed into him, icy and wild. Snow swirled past him in thick white sheets. A woman stood on the porch, soaked and shivering, holding a bundled infant close to her chest. Her coat was torn, her boots covered in ice, her breath shaking with every word. "I saw your light," she whispered. For a moment, Eli didn't speak. Something about her, her exhaustion, the way she held the child close, made his chest tighten. Finally, he stepped aside. "Get in!" She stumbled inside, nearly collapsing near the fire. Eli shut the door against the storm. The woman knelt near the hearth, teeth chattering. She loosened the blanket around the child, revealing a tiny girl crying softly. "I'm Clara Dawson," she breathed. "I was headed for Bozeman, but everything went wrong." Eli nodded stiffly. His eyes went to the baby. "You're lucky to be alive." Clara let out a weak laugh. "I don't know if it's luck or God's mercy." Eli added wood to the fire. Clara's face softened with warmth. Her hands trembled as she rocked her little girl. "She still feeds," Clara whispered. "Thank heaven for that." Samuel whimpered from the cradle, as if answering. Clara's eyes went soft with understanding. "How old is he?" 2 weeks. Her voice lowered. "Your wife?" Eli nodded once, jaw tight. She passed. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Finally, Clara spoke again, gentle as snowfall. "May I hold him?" Eli hesitated, but something inside him knew this was his only chance. He lifted Samuel and placed him in her arms. Clara cradled him close, her touch soft and sure. Samuel's cries softened. His tiny body relaxed. Eli's breath shook. For the first time in 2 painful weeks, his son rested. Clara looked up at him, eyes warm and steady. "He isn't weak," she whispered. "He's just hungry." A tear slipped down Eli's cheek before he could stop it. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, for the first time since Mary died, the cabin felt alive, and neither of them knew it yet. But that night was the beginning of everything. The storm passed slowly through the night, tapping against the roof and windows like it was waiting for someone to answer. Inside the quiet cabin, two babies slept side by side in the same cradle, their tiny hands resting close enough to touch. Clara sat near the fire, wrapped in one of Mary's soft blue shawls. The glow from the flames painted her face in warm gold, and her eyes held a gentleness Eli hadn't seen in a long time. Eli sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands tangled together as if he didn't know what to do with them. He watched her for a long moment. "You didn't have to stay up," he finally said. Clara smiled softly. "Neither did you." A faint laugh slipped from him. It was small, but real. He hadn't heard his own laughter since before everything fell apart. The sound surprised him, just as much as it surprised Clara. "You feed both babies," Eli said quietly, staring at the cradle. "You barely had strength when you came in that door, yet you've kept them calm all night." Clara looked toward the sleeping children, her eyes shining with tenderness. "When Anna was born," she said, "she wouldn't settle unless I held her close. I learned that babies don't know loss or hardship. All they know is warmth, food, and love." Eli swallowed. His voice dropped low. "I didn't think Samuel would survive the night." Clara reached over and gently placed her hand on his. "He's stronger than you think." Silence filled the room. Not an empty silence, but a soft one, full of something new, something healing. Clara took a slow breath. "My husband passed 6 months ago," she said softly. "He worked hard, but life was never easy. After he died, the place we lived, it wasn't safe anymore. I needed to get somewhere new, somewhere Anna could grow." Eli's jaw tightened with understanding. "I buried Mary last week," he said. "She never got to hold him without pain, and when I lost her, it felt like God turned his back and left me here empty." Clara's voice softened. "Maybe he didn't leave. Maybe he led us both here." Eli didn't answer. He just stared into the fire as if it held every answer he ever needed. The next morning, when sunlight finally broke through the storm clouds, something felt different. The air felt warmer. The world felt still. Eli stepped outside to fetch water. Snow covered everything in a soft white blanket. The trees sparkled under the early light. It was quiet, peaceful. When he returned, Clara was humming as she rocked the babies. Samuel stirred, then blinked up with bright eyes, stronger than the day before. Clara smiled. "He's hungry again." Eli's eyes softened. "That's a good sign." He stood there for a moment, unsure how to speak, the gratitude sitting heavy in his chest. Finally, he cleared his throat. "If you hadn't come last night—" Clara lifted her gaze, meeting his. "If you hadn't opened your door, I wouldn't be here either." They shared a look full of unspoken truth. Both of them had been saved. As the hours passed, Clara helped tidy the cabin. She washed blankets, swept the floor, and cooked a warm stew that filled the room with the smell of comfort. Eli worked outside, fixing the barn door, checking fences. But every few minutes, he found himself glancing toward the house, toward her. When he walked back inside for supper, Clara was stirring soup, while the baby slept peacefully in the cradle. She smiled a little when she saw him. "Dinner's ready," she said. "I hope it's not too plain." Eli sat down with a tired but grateful sigh. "It's the best food I've smelled in weeks." They ate quietly at first, listening to the fire crackle and the wind shift outside the window. Then Clara spoke. "I don't mean to step where I don't belong," she said gently, "but this home feels sad, like it's waiting for something." Eli set his spoon down. "It's waiting for her," he said quietly. "I haven't touched a thing since she passed." Clara lowered her gaze. "And maybe it's waiting for life again, too." Her words hit him deep. That night, after supper, and after the babies were tucked beneath soft blankets, Clara sat mending a tear in her shawl. Eli leaned against the doorframe, watching her fingers move carefully, patiently. Finally, he spoke. "When the road's clear," he said softly, "will you head for Bozeman?" Clara looked at the cradle, then back at him. "That Was the plan, she whispered, but I'll stay until you and Samuel don't need me anymore. Eli nodded slowly. I'm grateful for that. Clara smiled softly. Don't thank me yet, you haven't tasted my biscuits. For the first time in a long time, Eli chuckled. Clara raised a brow. There, she said, proof you can still smile. Eli looked at her then, really looked, and somewhere inside him, something gentle began to wake. A seed of hope, a second chance, a quiet beginning. The fire burned low, filling the room with soft light. Outside, the storm was gone, but inside, something new was just starting. Something no one expected, something neither of them was ready to name. Not yet. But soon, very soon. Spring came early to the mountains that year. The snow melted from the ridge and rolled down into the streams, carrying winter away piece by piece. The pines stood tall again, their branches free of ice. The Turner ranch felt different now, warmer, lighter, as if something broken had finally begun to mend. Weeks passed in a rhythm that felt natural. Eli worked the land from sunrise to late afternoon. Clara cooked, tended to the babies, and kept the cabin full of soft humming and gentle order. At night, they talked quietly by lamplight while Samuel and Anna slept tucked together, their small hands still reaching for each other. One afternoon, as Clara hung laundry to dry under the open sky, Eli watched her from the fence line. The wind played with her hair, lifting loose strands across her face. She laughed when Anna tried to grab the laundry rope and nearly pulled down the sheets. Samuel kicked in his small cradle nearby, happy and full of life. Eli leaned on the post, his voice soft. This place doesn't feel quiet anymore. Clara looked up. Quiet, she said, smiling. Or lonely. Lonely, he answered. Not anymore. Clara's smile softened. I'm glad. The days stretched longer as summer crept close. The grass grew high in the pasture. Wildflowers colored the hillside. For the first time since Mary's passing, Eli felt peace, not because grief had disappeared, but because something new had grown beside it. One warm morning, Clara walked outside, holding the letter sealed with wax. I think it's time I send this, she said. What's in it? Quote, my past, she answered, and my goodbye to it. She held the letter close as if handing over a part of her heart. I forgave him, she whispered. Not because he deserved it, but because I need to live without fear. Eli looked at her with quiet respect. You're stronger than you know. Clara's eyes softened. So are you. Life kept moving, simple and steady, until one morning hoofbeats echoed across the yard. The sound was slow, steady, official. Eli walked to the fence as a deputy dismounted his horse. Morning, Turner, Deputy Walker said. Just checking in. Eli nodded. Everything all right? The deputy looked at the cabin. I just wanted to be sure the woman from the stagecoach is safe. Clara stood in the doorway, Anna on her hip, Samuel beside her. Walker tipped his hat respectfully. You look well, ma'am. Clara nodded. We are. Walker gave a small smile. Well then, he said, mounting his horse again, I reckon my job here is done. Eli walked a few steps beside him. You sure there won't be trouble from Wheeler? Walker shook his head. Word is, Wheeler was forced to pay what he owed after other hands came forward. Seems truth has a way of catching up. He paused, then added with a faint grin. And it appears you two built something good here. Eli didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His silence said everything. When the deputy rode away, Clara let out a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Eli walked toward her. It's over, he said softly. Her eyes filled with quiet relief. Yes, she whispered. It is. That evening, as the sky turned orange and pink over the mountains, Eli walked onto the porch where Clara stood, swaying gently with Anna in her arms. He cleared his throat. Clara. She turned toward him. Yes? Eli took a breath, steady and sure. When you came here that night, I thought God was punishing me. I thought losing Mary meant my life was finished. Clara listened, her eyes tender. But now, Eli continued, I think maybe he was sending someone, not to replace what I lost, but to give what was still left a chance to live. Clara's voice trembled. What are you saying, Eli? He stepped closer. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if I'm doing this right. But I know I don't want you to leave. Not now. Not ever. Clara's breath caught. Her eyes glistened. You mean that? He nodded slowly. Yes, I do. She looked down at the babies sleeping nearby, then back at him. I didn't expect a new life, she whispered. I just wanted safety. But somewhere along the way, I found home. Eli reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The world around them felt still. The wind, the trees, even the earth seemed to pause. Then Clara spoke with a soft smile. "Then I reckon I'll stay." Eli let out a breath he'd been holding for months. Not from fear. This time it was relief. Later that night, after the babies fell asleep, Eli stepped outside again. The stars shimmered above the valley. Clara joined him, wrapping Mary's old shawl around her shoulders, not as a reminder of loss, but of love that had carried forward. Together they stood side by side as the night settled quiet and calm. Eli whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "Sometimes mercy doesn't roar or thunder." Clara rested her head gently against his shoulder. "No," she said, "sometimes it knocks softly on a lonely door." The cabin behind them glowed warm against the dark hills. Inside, 2 babies slept peacefully. And the ranch, once filled with grief, was finally a home again. A home stitched together with loss, hope, second chances, and a love born from hunger, heartbreak, and grace.